Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient's Live Talk. This is Nicholas Chan, reporter with Being Patient. And today we have Tracey Noonan here to speak about the decline of both of her parents' health due to Alzheimer's. And Tracey, who is a winner on the Shark Tank TV show, will talk about all the challenges that she and her family face between growing her own business, Wicked Good Cupcakes, alongside her daughter, but also at the same time, caring for both of her parents. So, and we'll also talk about the inspiration behind the TV script that she's co-writing called What the Family, with an exclamation mark. So yeah, Tracey, thank you so much for joining us.
Nicholas, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And Tracey, let's start off with, the inspiration behind you co-writing the TV script, What the Family. What was, what led you to want to write about it? And yeah, tell us a little bit about, what this script is about, really.
Sure, thank you. So as you mentioned, I've co-written a television pilot with a very good friend of mine, also a writer and stand-up comedian. His name is Justin McKinney. And I approached Justin with this idea in 2017 after having cared for, literally in my home, both of my parents who were diagnosed both with Alzheimer's disease. And one of the most important reasons that I wanted to write this story was because, as you know, Nicholas, there are millions and millions of other people like myself who have been thrust into this role of caregiver. And for as many of us as there are, it can be a really lonely place, and one can feel, overwhelmed and alone. And I think that, by sharing my story and, the story of my family, my parents, I thought that it would be a really good way to connect to these other people and also offer entertainment in a very humorous yet respectful way, and to be very genuine about portraying what this is actually like living with this disease.
Right, and you mentioned that caregiving can be a very lonely place and lonely path, and that's something that a lot of people say and feel. How about for yourself? Was it a lonely path for you at times when you're caring for both of your parents? Is that how you felt as well?
Yeah, first let me preface by saying I have an amazing family between my husband, my daughter, my sister-in-law Colleen, my brothers, all wonderful and so helpful. But when you're actually living day to day with people suffering from this disease, you can kind of start to feel like all these emotions, this roller coaster that you're on, are strictly your own feelings. And I think that's where the loneliness comes in. And I can remember in particular a 4th of July weekend where this was the point where my parents could not be left alone at all. And my husband and I were home. It was a beautiful weekend. And all I wanted to do was go to the beach for like 2 hours. I just wanted to go to the beach, and I couldn't because I had no one to watch my parents. And that feeling of not being able to live your life, and then the subsequent frustration and anger and resentment and sorrow and feeling that your life is just not what you pictured, can really make you feel isolated and alone. And I think a lot of people who are caregivers completely understand that feeling.
Right. And just going off of that, I think, you mentioned that, you like compartmentalize like your emotions, right? And, in a recent interview that I did with a daughter whose mom is Alzheimer's, she also talked about, the grief that family members and caregivers feel too. But, the thing is, when we're all contending with Alzheimer's in the family, like everyone has their own type of grief. And when grief happens, there's people can sort of, close their own blinds and only see, their own grief, but it can be difficult also to understand other people's grief, the grief of other family members. And so everyone has their own, emotions, and it can be hard to really express those emotions and relate to other people as well, right? So, I mean, I'm sure that's a big, like you said, that's a big inspiration for writing the TV script, right? So that, other people can understand that they're not alone in this journey, right?
Absolutely. So a really big light bulb for me, something that went off, was when I went to my first caregiver support group meeting. And I have to say, it was such a blessing, and I finally felt like I was within a group of people who got it, who understood what I was feeling. And one of the things I think is really important to point out, it's such a sad subject, Alzheimer's, and yet we have so many moments that are really, really funny. And my mom and dad would say and do things that were hilarious, and I would share them with my brothers or with my fellow coworkers, and people got to the point where they'd want to hear more of these stories. And if we didn't accept the humor that was part of this journey, I think we'd all curl up in a ball and die, right? Because it is so tragic. And the way that Justin and I wrote this pilot and are in the process of creating and developing the rest of the story is we inject a lot of humor. And we didn't want this to be doom and gloom. We didn't want it to be depressing and sad. We wanted to offer people going through the same thing a bit of comic relief. But again, done with a lot of reverence to the subject matter. So not laughing at someone as much as laughing with. And when I would go to these caregiver meetings and we'd all share stories, it was wonderful to see all the people around the room say, oh my God, my husband says that, or my grandmother does that, or my sister says that. So there was this really cool common bond that we all had, because there are so many commonalities within the disease that we all shared. And I think if you portray that, in a television series in an honest and genuine way, you'll have a huge following that will really be loyal, because they'll be able to sit there and say, I get that. I know that does happen. And I'm really proud of our writing. And we really took our time to dissect things and decide which way we would present the stories, because trust me, I have plenty of them to share.
Is there like a snippet or a little anecdote that you'd like to share, just to give our audience a little bit of, a picture in your head in terms of like a humorous moment with you and your parents that you have in mind?
Well, again, unless you put it in perspective, what was kind of funny was when my dad sort of stopped recognizing my mother and thought there was a strange woman in his bed, and this would panic him. And he would come downstairs and he would say to us, we have to talk. And it was funny, because whenever my dad said that, we knew that something outrageous was going to come out of his mouth. And he would come down and say to us, we have to talk. There's a strange woman in my bed, and your mother's going to be home soon. And he'd say, the first night, he did this 3 nights in a row. The first night he said to us, can I have a lawyer? And my husband and I said, no, Ed, you can't have a lawyer. And he'd just turn around and go back to bed. The second night he came down and said, there's a strange woman in my bed. Can I have a gun? And we're like, no, Ed, you cannot have a gun. And he'd say, okay. So he'd turn around and go back to bed. And on the third night he came down and said, there's a strange woman in my bed. Can I have some Viagra? And we're like, Ed, no, you don't need any Viagra, go back to bed. But it's just funny, the things that come out of their mouths and the things that they do and the way that they think, and it really can catch you off guard. And one of the things that I learned, and maybe it's right or maybe it's not, but deflection is your best friend. So whenever, they would ask for something that was outlandish or impossible, we would just deflect until the next day, or, we'll talk about it in a bit. And of course they forget, obviously. And it's kind of how we were able to manage them without agitating them, and getting on a subject that they would latch onto and not let go of. So you become really good at, handling a situation in a way that you diffuse any sort of issue that might arise.
And also seeing the humor in the situation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, got it. And yeah, I think your point on, making sure that the series is not all doom and gloom. I think that echoes a point that, in another interview I did with Ronald Reagan's daughter, when she was talking about what it was like for her, experiencing, going through her father's journey with dementia, is that, she said, there's so many colors to the experience of Alzheimer's. It's not just one color, but it's a full palette of colors, right? And so, like a TV series, right? You're trying to capture the full colors of this experience, right? It's not only sorrow. It's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely.
Even though there's a lot of sorrow and grief.
That's a really beautiful way to describe it. Actually, I've never thought of it that way, but amazing and very true. There are so many layers to it, and so many things that happen, and one moment can be really funny and then it just kind of turns sad, or you get really melancholy and nostalgic. And it's interesting how as my dad's disease progressed and he spoke less and less and recognized less and less things, we used a lot of music in the house. And we'd put old records on, and sure as anything, he would start singing like the B-side of, a James Brown album, like this obscure song he would know and sing. And I always found that really fascinating, that, the sense of smell or music could trigger a memory that they otherwise may not have had. So it was very interesting.
Got it. And yeah, let's go back in time a little bit then, Tracey. I want to talk a little bit about, maybe to set the stage, because I also want to ask you about what it was like to, balance like growing your business, Wicked Good Cupcakes, with caregiving. Can you take us back to like 2013 with appearing in the Shark Tank TV show, and then some of like the early warning signs in terms of your parents' symptoms of Alzheimer's?
Sure. So my daughter Danny and I aired on April 23rd. We were in season 4 of Shark Tank, and boom, like overnight, we just blew up. And, we were really fortunate that Shark Tank was so good to us. I don't know if it was the mother-daughter story, the product, what it was, but we received like a lot of updates and airtime. And that, of course, television helped propel our business even further. So, let me see. So 2013, we aired. In 2014, we filmed the next season. We did our update, and we're on the season opener for season 5, and continued like this hockey stick kind of growth. And my husband and I were living in the north end of Boston. This was in 2014. And I remember I was walking down the street one day, and I got a call from my youngest brother. And he said to me, "You are not going to believe this." And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Mom is in Israel. She fell into the Dead Sea. She almost drowned. She's in the hospital." Okay, we didn't know my mother was going to Israel. And I really should preface all of this. My parents had moved from Boston to Florida several years prior. And my folks were not like super warm and fuzzy, like didn't call us all the time. If I got my mother on the phone for 5 minutes, it was something. And I never spoke to my dad, who happened to be further along in the disease than my mother. So my mother could mask a lot for a 5-minute conversation on the phone. So now I hear that she's in the Dead Sea, she has chemical pneumonia, she's in a hospital in Israel, and my dad is now calling my brother saying, "Your mother's in jail, we gotta bust her out of prison," and just nonsense, talking nonsense. And so, of course, The flags are up.
Was your dad at Israel with your mom?
Oh no, she went she went with like a couple friends.
Okay.
So come to find out, she went over there. She had 1 day's worth of a change of clothes. She didn't bring her medication. She had no idea where she was. And so we get her home from Israel. We go down there, my brother and I, and we inspect the house, and it's a disaster. Like, food is rotting in the fridge, bills are piled sky high. Their neighbors are starting to come over and tell us that, when my dad drives, he gets lost and has to call someone to come find him. We find out from the bank that, my dad's going there every day and taking large sums of money out of the bank, and no one knows where the money is. There's stuff hidden all over the house. It was a disaster. And they had really no money left. So now we have my parents down there. We take my mother from Israel directly to Boston, put her in a hospital in Boston, bring my dad up there. My daughter, Danny, and I go down, clean out the house, we sell the house, and it's like, okay, they're staying in Boston. So my dad is really much more obvious that something's wrong. So we make an appointment with a neurologist, find out that he has Alzheimer's. So we decide.
And he was diagnosed in 2014.
2014, correct.
At the age of 76.
Yes. We have him diagnosed. We think, okay, well, we'll put them in assisted living. Mom still seems okay, because we didn't know that while she was in Israel, she didn't know where she was. We still didn't have any of that information. So long story short, they're in assisted living for like 4 months, and it's a disaster. They can't even turn on the television. My dad doesn't know how to make a sandwich anymore. So we have a conversation, and my brother's sister-in-laws, my husband and I, and we decide that Scott and I will buy a bigger house and move my parents in with us. And so in 2015, in January, that's exactly what we did. We moved my parents in. My mom, go ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about your mom's diagnosis, because 2015.
That was 2015. She's now 76. She's diagnosed with Alzheimer's also. Still not as far gone as my dad, but to the point where obvious changes are happening. I one day followed them. She was driving the car, and I followed them to see what she was driving like. And that night I took her keys away from her. She drove through a 5-way intersection like Mr. Magoo, just stepped on the gas, went through, people were beeping. It was just a disaster. I prayed that they'd get home okay and not kill anyone. And so began, I now step into the role of parent with my parents, who are like children, but are very belligerent because they're adults who don't like their freedoms being taken away. And so begins the whole process of caregiving. We had problems with my dad with sundowners till we figured out what that was. And we would literally race home to turn all the lights on before the sun set, so it wouldn't set him off and we wouldn't have this crazy man on our hands. My dad had to wear a low jack bracelet. All our doors were alarmed. They weren't keeping their hygiene well, so we had to put a bike lock on the fridge. So, if they had used the bathroom and they wanted to eat something, they wouldn't go in and contaminate food. I mean, there's just so many aspects of this disease that you don't even think about till you're in the midst of it. Hiding medications, hiding an iron, child-proof caps on a gas stove, all these things so they don't kill themselves or kill all of us, or it's just mind-boggling.
Right. And when you and your family decided to move both your parents to your house, was that a really tough decision for you? Because at the same time, you had a growing business that you were managing. Yeah.
At the time, no, because I didn't realize the depth of the amount of care. And I want to add that at this time, my father-in-law and mother-in-law were up in Stowe, Vermont, and my father-in-law was dying. He had stage 4 cancer. So we moved them in with us as well. So I had 4 adults in the house in varying degrees of disease or illness that we were managing and taking care of. And no, I didn't know the extent of what it would be like, not only the physical aspect of it, but the emotional aspect of it.
Right, right. And is that what led you to go seek support from a support group ultimately?
Yes, before I killed myself or one of them, I figured I'd need to go talk to someone and get on a path and figure out how to deal with this. Because one of the things a lot of caregivers don't do is they stop taking care of themselves. And that's a really, really disastrous path to be on. You have to be healthy, rested, and emotionally supported in order to do this. And a lot of people just are not. They're not ready, and they don't feel like anybody else could possibly understand what they're going through until they go to a support group and start talking to other people. And then they get it. Then they're like, okay, I'm not crazy. This does happen. You know, my dad developed Parkinsonisms. I didn't know what that was, understood that. You know, does someone have Lewy body? Is someone violent? Do you not understand why that's happening? You learn all of this in a support group, and it's just really a lifesaver. Honestly, it is.
Got it. And I just want to backtrack a little bit, about your mom's diagnosis. I was wondering, how do you feel then, as a daughter, now realizing that both parents are living with Alzheimer's? I mean, one is already very overwhelming. I mean, and then just a year later, your mother receives a diagnosis. Like, what was that like for you?
I can tell you exactly what I said. I said, are you effing kidding me? Both of them. And then selfishly, you take a step back and say, oh my God, am I doomed? Are my brothers doomed? What's going to happen to us? Because it is genetic. That's part of what this disease is. So you have this feeling of like, oh my God. And then you kind of selfishly, I guess, start to worry for yourself and start to imagine the worst. I mean, that for me lasted about a week. And then I was too wrapped up in what I was doing to worry about my future at that point. I had to survive day by day and make sure that my parents did and that my family was fine as well. And my business.
Right, got it. And yeah, how was your business doing, like during the time when your parents, when you were caring for your parents at home? Then, like, what was it like doing both at the same time for you?
Oh, so I have to say that I had the most amazing group of coworkers on the face of the earth, starting with my husband, who really literally like ran the show. My daughter Danny was amazing, and then Melissa, Sandy, Becky, like all of the people who worked with us, who completely understood and gave me permission to come into work and just vent, or to share stories, or honestly, sometimes I would just go to the office and do what I needed to do for my parents, just to be away, because there was a lot of things like dealing with Social Security, dealing with getting them on assistance, regular, their insurance, their prescriptions. Like, there's a lot you have to manage, and you spend hours on the phone, or hours on hold, or hours trying to find who you need to talk to, dealing with estate planning attorneys, becoming a medical proxy, who's a financial proxy, it's just unreal what you have to do and go through. And by going into the office, I felt again connected with my coworkers and my business, and it was just a blessing to have such great people who were so supportive and understanding of what we were all going through.
Right. And yeah, in terms of, like practical advice or some of the lessons you learned, throughout these years, I was wondering, say, for other caregivers who are at the same time, who's also, running a business, an entrepreneur like yourself, but also, caring for a parent with Alzheimer's or two, like in your case. Do you have any like concrete advice that you found was very helpful for you in terms of how to, balance the both in terms of being an entrepreneur, growing your own business, and caregiving?
Absolutely. Number one is don't be a hero. If someone offers you help, take it. Take it. Don't feel like you have to be Superman or Superwoman. If people want to give you assistance, let them. Express your emotions. Even if you have to hold a pillow up to your face and scream into it, don't let all of this consume you and grow inside you. Share what you're feeling. Go to support groups. There are things you can do for work. You may not be able to do everything you were doing. You can still be attached and be a part of it, but don't beat yourself up. Do what you can do. And really, that's the best advice. You just do what you can do. And if someone wants to help you, let them.
Right. So like do what you can do. And like if there's work for the business, you can delegate it to other people if you don't have the time or energy to do that.
Absolutely. You may not be in the best frame of mind to be on a conversation with a vendor or someone else. You just may not be there, may not be in that headspace you need to be in. So let somebody else do it.
Right. And like you said, you don't need to be the hero. You can delegate it to other people.
Absolutely.
Got it. Well, yeah, Tracey, is there any, last thoughts you'd like to add, or I haven't asked yet to our audience?
No, just I think for people who are in the process of this, do a lot of reading, do a lot of understanding, find organizations that appeal to you, like the Women's Alzheimer's Movement is one. Another one is the For Mom Foundation. Seth and Lauren Rogan are doing wonderful things with Hilarity for Charity. Immerse yourself in this, be involved, understand what's happening, read, and get rest. Understand that, you're one person fighting a big battle. It's a lot. It's a lot, but you can do this, and people want to help you.
Got it. Well, thank you thank you so much, Tracey, for sharing your insights. And for our audience, if you missed any of our this live talk, we'll have a recording uploaded on our YouTube channel, as well as a transcript on our website. And if you haven't signed up for a newsletter yet, don't forget to do so on our website. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.